Chapter 9. Riley was awoken by sunlight filtering into the room. She shifted under the blankets, snuggling up to a pillow in search of more sleep. She needed to get as much rest as possible before Ryan woke up. But something was off. It was quiet. Far too quiet. Riley was usually awoken by the screaming of children, or Ryan climbing all over her. She could usually hear people walking around the house or the T.V. blaring cartoons in the living room. But there was nothing. Not even the gentle breathing of her son sleeping in his bed. Riley shot up, quickly scanning her surroundings. It was not her fucking room. The floor was covered in spotless white carpet, and the furniture was all made from wood. The floral curtains and wallpaper were well coordinated and there wasn't a single toy in sight. Riley was sitting on a large double bed with pristine pink sheets. There was a white tiled bathroom between two double doors. What the fuck was happening? Riley didn't have long to think before another door swung open. Her whole body tensed. She backed up against the pillows as her fight or flight response kicked in. In walked Elijah carrying a large tray of food. He placed it down on the bed. Before her, there were scrambled eggs and sausages, along with a small stack of pancakes. The whole scene threw Riley off balance. "I thought you might be hungry," Elijah said cheerfully, like nothing was wrong. "So I brought you some food." Riley's stomach let out a small growl, but she was too mortified to touch it. "What is this place?" she asked, voice trembling. "My home." "Well, our home," he said. Riley could feel panic bubbling back to the surface. "How did I even get here?" She looked down at her pajamas, relieved to find that nothing was out of place. Did you kidnap me?" "I didn't have a choice," said Elijah. "It was the only way to make you leave." "I didn't need to leave," she angrily snapped. "Those people weren't good for you," said Elijah. "They were filling your head with lies, drugging you and turning you against me. Do you seriously believe all the shit that comes out of your mouth?" "You're safe now," Elijah said, like she was the one who was nuts. "I'll help you. We can fix this together." He reached for her hand, but Riley pulled it back. "I don't need your help," she said. "Riley dash. Just stay away." Riley scrambled backwards until she reached the other side of the bed. Riley dash. Riley dashed for the door, slipping outside before he could follow. She ran down a long hallway until she reached a set of wide stairs, jumping down two at a time towards a marble entrance hall. She threw open the front door and ran past an expensive car and well-maintained gardens, dashing down a long stone driveway and through two large iron gates. Riley had no idea where she was. She decided to follow the road until she reached a town, then work it out from there. She walked barefoot down the mountain, ducking into the bushes to hide when she heard a car coming. She passed several driveways leading up to unmarked buildings or mansions, but she didn't feel like she could trust the people inside. What if they were werewolves too? What if they took her straight back to Elijah? She needed to get back to East Cove and Ryan. After hours of walking, she spotted a small town. There was a cluster of houses and an old-fashioned main street. The tin roofs were rusted and there were several crumbling homes, but it didn't look any different to other country towns that Riley had passed on her travels. She slowly walked towards the gas station, deciding that it was the safest place to ask for directions and find a way back to East Cove. It was impossible to avoid the curious stares of several people who walked past. They quietly muttered to each other while glancing back at her. Riley assumed it was because she was still dressed in her pajamas. But the sight of a wolf casually walking down the road made her insides freeze. No, it couldn't be. Several townspeople emerged from their homes to stare, like they'd never seen an outsider before. They looked like regular people, but Riley could tell that something was off. They didn't smell human. "What's she doing here?" Riley heard someone mutter. "An outsider? No, she has the wolf. I can smell it on her. Is she from up the hill? She doesn't look like them. What should we do about her?" Riley backed away, fear flooding her mind. No, they were all werewolves. She spun on her heels and dashed down the road, trying to get away as fast as possible. The forest. Her instincts screamed. Riley dashed to the side of the road, running through an overgrown car park, and then into the bushes. Stray branches scratched her face. She glanced over her shoulder, but no one was following. She felt too afraid to let her guard down, plunging deeper into the woods. Riley soon discovered that she was shit at navigating her way through the undergrowth. She pushed her way through the bushes and climbed over large rocks and vines, searching for anything that could give her a hint to where she was going. Riley hadn't been paying proper attention when she blindly dashed into its depths, throwing her sense of direction off. Things would have been easier if she had her phone, but it was probably back in her room in East Cove, along with Ryan and all of her things. Riley hoped that her son was okay. He had Trissy, Vanessa and Scott, so hopefully he'd be fine. What the fuck was Elijah thinking? How could he possibly assume that kidnapping her would be a good idea? Did he expect her to just bow down before him and merely suck his dick? Fucking werewolves, Riley swore under her breath while pushing a large branch out of the way. As soon as she got back to East Cove, she would grab Ryan and take him away. Somewhere far where Elijah would never find them. She'd be perfectly content never seeing that fucker again. Riley sat down on a fallen tree trunk to take a break. Her feet were scratched and aching from walking without shoes. The forest was silent except for the chirping of birds and the rustling of wind moving through the trees. Nobody was coming after her. It was pointless to keep moving forward without any direction. There was no telling how much further the forest extended. She could spend days walking and not reach anything. She needed to go back to the main road. Riley laid back against the tree trunk and sighed, closing her eyes to try and get some rest. There was no telling when she'd next get the chance. The longer she sat there, the louder the forest became around her. Riley could hear the humming of insects and the footsteps of distant animals. She could smell which creatures had passed through the area. If she just followed their scent, she could find her next meal. She longed to sink her teeth into something delicious and warm. The smell of rabbit and possum was enough to make her mouth water. That's when it hit Riley. It had been more than a day since she'd last consumed her medication. Her werewolf senses were slowly coming back. Fuck, Riley swore and got to her feet. There wasn't any time. The longer she waited, the more that she risked having her mind taken over by the wolf inside her. Riley could feel it clawing to the surface, furious after being contained for so long. It wanted to run, hunt, and howl under the moon, taking everything that it had craved for so long. It wanted him. Riley quickly walked, trying to retrace her steps, but she collapsed to her knees when a strange spasm hit her body. She threw her arms out to support her own weight, only to look down and see that her right arm was covered in gray fur. No, Riley muttered, begging it to stop. No, please, not now. Riley refused to let the animal take control. She gasped as her body began to change, bones breaking and reshaping like they had a life of their own. Fur sprouted from her skin as her body shrunk, large teeth extending from her jaw as claws emerged from her hand. In a matter of seconds, Riley was gone. In her place stood a large gray wolf. Chapter 1. The Holt Brothers. Rose coughed as she choked on her tea. Rose bent over the table as she struggled to contain her laughter, petite shoulders shaking. Her voice echoed throughout the small tea shop, bouncing off the faded wallpaper. Several elderly women turned their heads to stare, muttering under their breath as they chewed on small cakes. It was unbecoming of a young woman to display such vulgar behavior, but Rose didn't care. In their uptight small town, she was well known for being a rebel. Her long black hair freely cascaded over her shoulders, and her smooth skin was tan from spending too much time in the sun. Her short sleeves showed more skin than what was considered socially acceptable. Few women had the same courage to openly flaunt themselves. Mrs. Holt, Rose laughed to herself. I can't believe that I'm gonna have to call you Mrs. Holt. Evelyn was not laughing. The young redhead sat opposite Rose, behind a small mountain of scones. Her curly hair was tied back into a tight bun. She was wearing a long blue dress and white gloves, trying to look like a proper young woman with an impeccable reputation. Evelyn huffed and crossed her arms. Her gaze fell down to the flower print tablecloth. It's not funny, Evelyn muttered. No, of course not. Rose giggled as she tried to keep her voice down. It's hilarious, Mrs. Holt. Evelyn tried to contain her mortification. The marriage was arranged suddenly. She barely had time to process it. As the fifth daughter from a meager family, Evelyn didn't have any better prospects. It was pure luck that the Holt family even reached out to her father. Rose dabbed her dress with a silk handkerchief to clean herself up, letting out the occasional giggle. I must say that this comes as a surprise, Rose said. I heard word around town that those two brothers were engaged to marry someone else. Yes, said Evelyn. They organized the wedding and everything, but then she left. Who can blame her? Rose poured herself another cup of tea from a ceramic teapot. The older brother Isaac may be decent looking, but no sane woman wants to deal with Liam Holt. Liam Holt. The name sent trembles down Evelyn's spine. Liam Holt was 2 years younger than her. They went to the same school. Evelyn remembered him as a sullen young boy, who was fond of pranks and desperate for attention. He'd since bloomed into a broad, intimidating man. There were plenty of unpleasant rumors swirling about him around town. Drinking, gambling, fighting. Liam seemed to show little regard for social etiquette. He did whatever or whoever he fancied, causing nothing but stress for his elderly father. Evelyn tried not to let her unease show. I'm sure that he must have decent qualities, other than being a self-entitled little shit. Well, he's a lot larger now. That's not the only part of him that's probably large. Evelyn was temporarily lost for words. Rose, she scolded, turning bright red. You shouldn't bring up those sort of things in public. Why not? You're going to become very well acquainted with both Isaac and Liam's things soon enough. Evelyn groaned. She'd been too busy stressing about the wedding to even think about that. Rose was already married. She had no problem talking about what occurred in the bedroom, but Evelyn had never seen a naked man. Just the thought of doing such things was enough to make Evelyn feel hot and flustered. I wonder which one is larger, said Rose casually, like she was talking about the weather. The older or younger brother? You'll have to let me know. I doubt they'll let me measure. You'd be surprised. Men love to brag about the size of their baby makers. Several old women at the nearby table sent them stern glares, letting out exaggerated coughs. Evelyn sensed that it was time to shut down the conversation before Rose could embarrass them further. The last thing she needed was any unpleasant rumors. Going back to her new in-laws. Please, Evelyn begged. Can we please talk about something else? If you insist. Rose took a bite of a scone. But I'm always available if you need some marriage tips. I'll keep that in mind. Evelyn sighed and nervously scrunched up a silk napkin. What was she getting herself into? Due to the lack of available women in their area, it became a tradition for brothers to share wives. It was preferred amongst richer families who didn't want to split the family assets. The arrangement seemed to work well. Most of the time, Evelyn had dreamed of the day that she would get married, but she never imagined entering a family as well off as the Holts. They obviously expected a proper young woman who wouldn't embarrass them in front of the townspeople. It will be okay, Evelyn muttered under her breath, failing to calm her racing heart. Her wedding carriage slowly made its way through the town. It rocked with the bumps in the road, threatening to send her flying from the leather seat. All I have to do is say a few words, she thought. If someone like Rose can do, I can too. Her pale fingers played with the pattern on her ivory wedding dress. The hem was a little short, but the dressmaker assured her that nobody would notice. She was grateful that her face was concealed by a thin veil. Evelyn's father snored from the seat opposite her. He was dressed in a worn black suit that had seen better days. It was his 5th time to give a daughter away, so most of the excitement had long worn off. He was looking forward to a quiet retirement as soon as Evelyn was out of the house. They arrived before a large church on the edge of town. Tall gray spirals ominously reached for the sky, and wide stained glass windows sparkled in the morning sun. Several well-dressed men were mulling around outside, trading war stories and kicking the dirt by their feet. Daddy, Evelyn said gently as she shook her father awake. We're here. Her elderly father snapped to attention, quickly looking around. Okay, let's get this over with. He huffed like it wasn't one of the most important days of Evelyn's life. After you, my dear. Inside, the pews were filled to the brim with guests. Most were friends and relatives of the Holt family. Evelyn spotted her sisters and their many children. James. No. One sister snapped as she failed to keep an impatient toddler in his seat. Mama, please help me, she begged their elderly mother. Their mother let out a sigh of frustration and attempted to get the energetic toddler under control. Another grandchild tugged on her shawl from the seat beside her. Rose was there too, wearing a bright red dress that was far too flashy. Her quiet husband was buried in a book. Evelyn gripped her father's arm and looked to the front of the room, standing as straight as possible while nervously taking one step in front of the other. At the end of the aisle stood her two fiancés. The older brother, Isaac Holt, was a calming presence. His dark hair was neatly slicked back, and his face was freshly shaved. He looked dashing in a smart black jacket that suited his broad frame. The younger brother, Liam, seemed less bothered with his appearance. His brown hair was shaved at the sides, and his dark eyes were framed by long lashes. He was slightly taller than his brother, with a well-toned physique that hinted to a more active lifestyle. Evelyn was certain that he would have been more popular with women if it weren't for his awful reputation. Liam shuffled uncomfortably, chewing his lower lip like he'd rather be elsewhere. His elderly father sent stern glances from the front row, almost daring Liam to make a scene. Liam's glance flicked to Evelyn, but he scowled and quickly looked away. Everyone fell silent as the music began. The guests stood to their feet as Evelyn's father diligently walked her down the aisle. She was thankful for the veil which concealed her face. No one would see her sweat. Evelyn's father placed her between the two Holt brothers, then took a seat in the front row. All eyes were on Evelyn. She anxiously gripped her dress as the priest talked, spouting a long speech about devoting themselves to each other and the sanctity of marriage. She tried her best to focus on his words instead of allowing terror to overtake her. "I do," she confidently pronounced once it was her turn. Isaac smiled and reached out to grip her hand. "I do. I do," Liam added somewhat reluctantly. The priest remained silent as though he was waiting for something. "Take her hand," Isaac quietly hissed. "Seriously," Liam whispered back. "Just do it." Liam rolled his eyes, then took hold of Evelyn's other hand. His warm grip sent tingles up her arm. It unnerved her. She wanted to pull her hand out of Liam's grasp, but the priest wrapped a red ribbon around their hands, forever binding them together. "Like this ribbon, you are now connected in the eyes of the Lord," said the priest. "You may now kiss the bride." Isaac was first. Evelyn closed her eyes, heart frantically pounding in her chest. He leaned down to press a soft kiss to her lips, innocent enough for their audience. Next was Liam. She expected the same kind of chase kiss, but instead he took hold of Evelyn's jaw and crashed their mouths together, sucking on her lower lip like no one was watching. There was a dangerous glint in his eyes when he pulled away. There was no turning back. She was married to the Holt brothers. The reception was held in a large hall at the back of the church. Dozens of tables were covered in white tablecloths and flowers. Energetic children weaved around adults chatting in small groups. There was little time to eat and relax. Evelyn was approached by numerous guests, all congratulating her on the wedding, whether they genuinely thought so or not. There were far too many names and faces to possibly remember. It was overwhelming. Evelyn felt a kind hand against her lower back. She looked up to see Isaac's serene face. Sweat dripped from his brow, and there were lines under his eyes like the wedding nerves may have gotten to him as well. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I'm sorry that we haven't had much time to talk. Wanted to say that you look lovely." "Thank you, Isaac," she said shyly while trying to stop the heat rising to her face. It was hard to believe that they were now husband and wife. Unfortunately, Isaac's presence wasn't enough to distract her from spiteful voices which echoed from a nearby table. "I heard that it's the same dress," said one young woman with flushed cheeks. She nursed a glass of wine while unceremoniously slumping in her chair. "It's a good thing that she and Meredith are about the same size," said another. "Maybe that's why they picked her. Can't see why else the Holt family would choose someone so simple." It felt like someone was squeezing Evelyn's heart in her chest. She didn't need another reminder that the ceremony had been haphazardly thrown together since the previous fiancé called off the engagement. "Ignore them." Isaac led Evelyn away. "They're just jealous." "Perhaps they're right," Evelyn said grimly. "I'm sure there were plenty of better women you could have married." "Hey!" Isaac reached for her hand. He gently tugged Evelyn towards him, forcing her to look into his dark eyes. "I have no interest in those other women. I'm happy to be marrying you." Evelyn gave him a weak smile. They may have lived in the same village their whole lives, but they'd barely exchanged words until their engagement was finalized. "Thank you, Isaac." Evelyn meant to sound confident, but it came out as barely a whisper. Isaac gave her a gentle smile. There are still plenty of guests left that I need to thank. You should go speak with Liam. Maybe you can convince him to help me. Okay, I'll try. Evelyn nodded. We'll talk later. Isaac kissed the back of her hand, then pulled away. It didn't take long for Evelyn to find Liam. She'd been keeping tabs on him from the moment the reception started. He was sitting alone at a table in the corner, darkly nursing a glass of wine. Like someone had kicked his puppy. Evelyn had a feeling that the wedding had been rushed in order to give Liam less time to chase her away. She slowly approached him, trying to contort her face into a pleasant smile. Liam, she politely greeted. Evelyn, he said shortly without looking away from his glass. She felt a stab of annoyance. Is that really the best way to greet your new wife? Evelyn said more coldly than she intended. Liam knocked back his drink. We both know what this marriage really is. Only went through with it because my father threatened to disinherit me. And you because you don't have any better options. The only one who's okay with this crap is Isaac. He pointed to his brother, who was still tirelessly thanking guests. Only because he's too much of a sheep to make his own life decisions. Evelyn clenched her fist. The nerve of him. I'll have you know that I had plenty of other eligible suitors, she said. Really? Liam narrowed his eyes. Who? Shit, Evelyn thought. I wouldn't want to embarrass them by mentioning their names to my new husband. Liam's mouth curved up into a wicked smile, like he didn't believe her lie. Then what attracted you to us when you had so many other options? He leaned in closer. Was it the money? Or my dazzling personality? I just wanted to get married. Liam laughed. Really? That's the best you can come up with. He took a long sip of his drink. You know what comes after the ceremony, right? Have you decided who gets to bed you first, me or my brother? Evelyn opened her mouth to reply, but Liam cut her off. And please don't say that you want us both at the same time, he said. Because I have no desire to see my brother's face when he comes. We agreed that since there was no courtship period, Evelyn tried to keep her voice polite and clipped. We'd first take some time to get to know each other. Maybe I can't wait that long. Liam laughed, clearly intoxicated. I'm sure that our father wants to get his precious heir as soon as possible. Your sisters have managed to pump out plenty of kids, so he must be hoping that you're a prime baby machine just like the Evelyn violently slammed her fist down on the table without thinking, causing Liam to jolt with shock. Listen here, Liam, she angrily hissed. You may be bigger now, but you're still that spoiled little brat who'd throw a tantrum when he didn't get his own way. I'm sorry that you were forced into this, but as your wife I expect at least an ounce of respect. Evelyn spun on her heels, leaving the table before she could see his response. Heat rose in her face, a mix of embarrassment and anger. If Liam Holt thought that he could push her around just because they were married, he was wrong. Chapter 2. They were sent to the Holt summer home for their honeymoon. It was a large sandstone manor several hours outside of town. It was luxurious yet secluded enough to give Evelyn and her new husbands the privacy to adjust to married life. Evelyn had a feeling that the Holt family were expecting more to come out of the trip. She was subjected to a sex talk by one of her older sisters who also had 2 husbands of her own. They could turn out to be very needy, but it's amazing how much your body can take, said Evelyn's sister. Troy and Matthew were insatiable in the beginning. Sometimes we'd have sex at least 6 times. Stop please, Evelyn begged. She didn't want to imagine her sister and brother-in-laws in the bedroom together. You don't need to tell me about that. It came as no surprise when Liam was sullen and difficult for most of the trip. They shared a carriage together, but he successfully made every second unpleasant. Isaac tried to make it bearable for Evelyn. He was overly friendly and tried to engage Evelyn in conversation while Liam childishly rolled his eyes in the corner. She spent the last hours napping against the coach window just to avoid the tense atmosphere. She was exhausted by the time they finally arrived. The coachman helped bring their bags to the entrance and placed them down on the stone floor. Liam took one look inside, then spun on his feet, black coat flailing behind him as he stormed down the hall. I'm going out already, said Isaac. But we only just got here. Liam didn't answer. He threw open the large wooden doors and walked out, letting them slam shut behind him. Liam, Liam. Isaac bolted out the door after him. Evelyn caught traces of a heated argument. Isaac returned alone minutes later. He sighed and ran a hand through his thick hair in frustration, eyes darting to Evelyn. He straightened his back and attempted to compose himself, twisting his disapproving scowl into a pleasant smile. I'm sorry, Evelyn, he just needs time. Liam has always had more difficulty adjusting to new things. It's okay, Evelyn said more happily than she intended. After the terrible carriage ride, she was glad that the man-child was gone. Why don't we take a walk around the estate? Isaac placed a hand against her back. I'll give you the grand tour. Isaac led her through well-furnished corridors and stylish sitting rooms. Was impressive for a summer home, twice the size of the estate that Evelyn grew up in. Liam and I spent most of our summers here when we were boys, said Isaac. You must have many happy memories, said Evelyn. Mostly, when my brother wasn't being difficult. Evelyn failed to suppress a laugh. Forgive me, sighed Isaac. I know that it's not good to speak ill of my brother, especially when you're married to him as well. It's quite all right, Evelyn assured him. My sisters and I would often quarrel over the most ridiculous things. Then you can begin to imagine what I've been through, Isaac said with a strained smile. Evelyn wanted to ask more, but Isaac seemed eager to change the topic. This room will be Liam's. He pointed to a closed door. And that one is mine. Of course you'll have your own room as well, but you're welcome to come to one of ours. He paused. If you would like. Evelyn suppressed a laugh as his cheeks went red. His nervousness was adorable. How could two brothers be so different? Here, this is your room. Isaac quickly pushed open the door and led her into a wide bedroom. There was a large double bed, dresser, and wardrobe. The walls were covered in soft pink flower wallpaper. Her bags had already been placed before a large window that looked out onto a small rose garden. Evelyn nervously looked at the pristine yellow sheets on the double bed. Was obviously big enough to accommodate more than one person. Was this where she was expected to consume their marriage? Evelyn looked away to see an open door leading into a small side room. She stepped closer to see a wooden crib and an assortment of children's toys. Is this a nursery? She asked. I'm sorry. Isaac hastily walked over and shut the door. I swear that it wasn't here before. They must have set it up before we arrived. My family is quite overeager. My aunt wouldn't stop dropping hints all the way to the church. Evelyn chewed her lower lip. There was one thing that she'd been wondering for a while. If your family is so insistent on an heir, she said, wouldn't it make sense for you to both have your own wives, to double your chances? Isaac sighed and took a seat on Evelyn's bed. My father doesn't wish to split the estate. He and his brother bickered horribly after my grandfather's death, so he doesn't want the same to occur to Liam and I. He thinks it's best that we live together as one family, no matter how much my younger brother protests. She sat down beside Isaac. Liam really doesn't like me, does he? That's not true. He reached for her hand. Liam just has more trouble getting along with others. I'm sure that once he gets to know you, love will soon follow. Evelyn nodded, even though she didn't believe his words. She wouldn't be surprised if they woke up the next morning to find Liam long gone. I want this arrangement to work, Isaac continued, for all of us, so I hope that it's not too much to ask you to be patient. It's okay, Evelyn said gently. I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. Thank you. He reached forward to embrace her, hugging her tightly to his chest. Evelyn froze. It was unexpected, but she couldn't deny that his chest was warm against hers. It didn't feel unpleasant. She slowly relaxed into his touch. Isaac pulled away, but there was something about his face. Can I kiss you? He asked. Evelyn was lost for words. Part of her wanted to run, but she also wanted to know what it felt like to be with a man. Would it be anything like Rose's scandalous stories? She nodded. Isaac's rough hand softly cupped her cheek. His face hesitantly moved towards hers, eyes fluttering close.